You see, it doesn't. No, it's like duck à l'orange. Whoever invented that as well, they got it wrong.
But your pizza choices are pretty horrific, though.
No, they're not.
You're the man who likes tuna on a pizza, right?
I like tuna and onion on a pizza.
Oh, okay.
I'm
not with you there.
All right, I'm on my own again.
Not like to stand on. Welcome to Cloud Realities, an original podcast from Capgemini, and we come live from Microsoft Ignite in McCormick Place in Chicago for our final live set of sessions. I'm Dave Chapman.
And I'm Rob Gurney.
And joining us later in this final episode from Ignite is Kathleen Mitford, CVP for Global Industry Marketing at Microsoft, Irina Nechaeva, the General Manager of Product Marketing for Identity and Access at Microsoft, and Marco Casalaina, the Vice President of Azure AI and AI Futurist, and as you will see, pizza expert. But before we get to that, let's take a look back at our themes. So, Rob, you set out what you thought the 4 big themes were at the beginning of,
yes,
or rather at the end of the keynote. Has it hung together, and have you got any additions?
So, absolutely, I think the keynote was a great setup for this conference. So it's held true to what was on stage. So I don't think the themes have changed. What I do think is we see some subset things coming out, like we discussed with the operating system change, the hackathon, all things that need to be in the ecosystem and have to work well, that foundation changing. And obviously we've had some great conversations about security built in by default, all that sort of stuff. So that's another basis, as I would call it, just a basis theme. But I think there's a lot of focus on the individual. We've had the conversation about the agentic future, but it's empowering. It's empowerment. Yeah, that's the theme. When you actually boil it all down, it's creating productivity, it's creating freedom, it's introducing more time to do the things that you want to do. We had the conversation about the doctor who can spend more time with their family because AI's done the toil and things like this. So empowering the human, I think, is key. And so hopefully on the conversations we're going to have today, we'll hear a little bit more about how that enterprise transformation really works. And don't forget that key theme that we went through, or the key themes we went through, was agents everywhere. For as far as the eye can see. Some silicon announcements which are absolutely amazing, but have been underplayed, I think, at the conference, where we're talking about hugely complex things being boiled down onto chips, which means as this technology is built, you can take it with you.
I didn't even realize they were doing silicon, to be honest with you. That's actually a big learning there.
And the edge stuff, cloud everywhere, distributed AI, the compute. There's a lot in there that you sort of go, I'm not sure it's been sung as wide as it should, because they're all key enablers again. The things that will make it work.
Well, it's not unusual at conferences like this that the sheer volume of what's being talked about and the limited amount of time to dig into detail, stuff does get lost, and sometimes big stuff gets lost.
And you had all the data stuff about AI doesn't work without good data, and then that final point about democratization, which is the open for all to use or all to build.
And the other challenge we set ourselves was to try and gain a deeper understanding about the phrase AI transformation and what that means. And do you think we've identified the core components, at least as it's understood now? I
think we can see the foundations which will be needed, so the critical success factors in technology to allow it to happen. I think industry has a long way to go, and there's still a massive learning curve. Now, we're out of the have a play, have a go. Now it's time to get serious about it. So I'm hoping to see, rather than point issues being solved by AI, that big scaled issues start to get solved as well.
Yeah, I think for me, it's crystallizing at least as sort of 3 cornerstone aspects of transformation. The first one, which is well underway, which is the sort of almost personal use case or specific use case use of things like co-pilots and assistants. There is the structural and systemic aspects of what might come out of agentic. And that will start to hammer into processes, start automating processes way beyond what we might have seen in the days of RPA, and that will become dynamic and actionable. And then the third big component for me, maybe there's 4 actually, thinking on my feet. The third big component I was going to go for was culture. Cultural change, capability build, much like any other type of radical transformation, but this is kind of through the roof. big enough with the world of cloud and digital, and this is kind of really, really raising the bar on that. And then the final one is probably security and responsibility.
Yeah, you have to responsibility. I think if you compare it to, I'll go back to the architecture thing, Dave, because that's me. When we built an architecture, we had some data, we had something that processed the transactions against that data, and we had a user interface, right? Those are the three classic three-tier architectures. What you can see the future becoming is I've got a good data set and I've got AI over the top, an agent-based framework, and that's it.
Yeah.
And you've got a very natural language interface into the system. Yeah. So that's what LLMs have brought, the ability to interface with the system much more easily. So we can probably see a future where that very traditional, rigid transactional architecture, which is difficult to change, gets detonated out of the water.
So look, good stuff. A lot of takeaways. I actually feel like I've legitimately learned a lot as we've been talking through these conversations over the last couple of days. So a really good week. Very steady vibe, I would say. Yeah. Quite a sort of studious, serious, business-centric vibe at this one.
Definitely the industry focus coming out. And it is, as you said it earlier, the word cloud has disappeared. AI is everywhere.
Yeah, it's everywhere. And now let's also wrap up a little bit on our adventures in Chicago. So last night, a rare thing happened, Robert.
It did, David. I was quite surprised about last night. We went to, I had suggested a bar that had been recommended, Buddy Guy's Legends.
Yeah.
I think you were a bit...
I was sceptical.
Yeah.
I thought it might be one of those places, like a bit like the Hard Rock Cafe or something. Like
touristy.
Very touristy.
But it's not though, is it, Dave? It's not.
I was extremely pleasantly surprised by it.
And then at the end of the night, Mr. Buddy Guy came out on stage.
Wasn't the end of the night though, was it?
Well, it was for me. It wasn't for you.
That's right.
Let's be brutally honest about it.
About the middle. It was the middle innings of the evening.
Yeah, the middle innings where I got the absolute superstar of blues came on the stage. I saw that and I thought, well, you can't beat that. I'm off.
It was absolutely amazing. So, like
88 years old and could still sing so well.
And
amazing.
He was like a combination between a raconteur and a blues singer.
His life commentary as he's going in, as the blues riffs going off the background, was absolutely outstanding.
It was really, really tremendous. And then, so that finished about 10:30, and then the band came back on stage, and they had various other people join them, and then they did like an hour and a half jam, basically.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the jam that I thought it was going to be. So it wasn't like a jazzy sort of open-ended freeform thing. It was more like they just kind of brought other people in and, played different songs and stuff like that.
Well, the bit I like, and it's the thing with the blues, is the band didn't know he was going to come on stage, and they just played in the background as he sung and talked. And
that was amazing. The riffs and that
was very good.
Yeah, little accenting riffs. It's tremendous. So one more time, where was that?
Buddy Guy's Legends.
Yeah, so if you're in Chicago, that's
highly
kind
recommended.
Of a must-do. Like a really fun evening. Now, the other aspect of Chicago that we have been, well, at least Marcel and I have been committed to getting to the bottom of, was the Standing on Deep Pan Pizza.
Yeah.
And what we thought was going to be a trade-off between Lou Malnati's and Giordano's. Yeah. So Marcel and I committing to the bit, properly putting our research in.
You've found out a lot more about this, though, haven't you, Dave?
No, we were going to on the big. I had in mind at the beginning of this that we were gonna kind of do the big reveal on kind of the findings of the report. But I'm going to leave that to our final guest of the week, who is Marco Casalaina, who blows us out of the water with his pizza knowledge, it is fair to say.
He's a smart man when it comes to food and pizza. And AI, actually, doing. To be fair.
So if you listen to nothing else in this particular pod, fast forward to the last 15 minutes and you will get a better insight into the world of Chicagoland pizza than we've managed to muster up.
It was an amazing tour, Dave. Thank you for that.
It is my pleasure, Marcel. Yeah. Do you feel like you've learned something?
A lot.
Well, if you want to find out who our favourites were and, kind of an expert view from Marco, join us towards the end of the show. But now, let's go to the first conversation of the final episode in Chicago. And joining us is going to be Kathleen Mitford. So let's go to our conversation with Kathleen. I'm delighted to say that with us today, we have got Kathleen Mitford. She's the CVP at Microsoft for Global Industry Marketing. Kathleen, how are you today?
I am doing great today. How are you?
You know, it's day 3, a little punch drunk, I'm not going to lie, but getting through, looking forward to the conversation.
Me too.
And how have you been finding Chicago and Ignite so far?
Well, I'm looking out the window at Chicago right now, and it's snowing, but beautiful, beautiful city. Actually, on day 1, it was 65 degrees, and I was lucky enough to be able to do a nice run outside, so experience the other side of Chicago. Nice. So Chicago's been great, and Ignite has been absolutely amazing for us. As you mentioned, I lead industry marketing at Microsoft, and this year we've really significantly increased our industry presence here. So, really the excitement with customers on, not just technology, but how technology can really drive true business outcomes has been at the heart of the conversations I've been having with customers over the last couple of days.
Very much looking forward to digging into that in a second. But you're right about Chicago 2 days ago. Were you in the city when it had that really low-level cloud?
Yes.
It looked spectacular, didn't it?
It was beautiful.
Yeah. Very Gotham-y. Yeah. I thought it's a very cinematic city.
It is. It is.
Let's move into the business then. So let's talk about your role. So why don't you just set the table for us a little bit on kind of the scope of the role and how you're interacting with industry and the different verticals at the moment?
Yes, absolutely. So in my role, I lead industry marketing. So what that means is I work with our customers, I work with our sales team, I work with our engineering team on what are the industries that Microsoft should go after. And then based upon those industries, where does Microsoft and our partner ecosystem have a right to play? So based upon the business challenges for, that are different for, let's say, retail versus healthcare versus financial services, how does the Microsoft portfolio and our partner ecosystem best serve those? So, we work with our customers and the different teams on Microsoft's strategy for each industry.
Right.
And then how we engage with customers. And then, of course, my title has marketing in it. Yeah. So, of course, we do all of the marketing messages, all of the industry events as well.
And so how do you, what's the process of getting the feedback from customers? Are you running like roundtables or advisory panels or something like that?
Yes, we have customer advisory boards. We use shows like this at Ignite.
Right.
Down on the floor, we have industry booths and customers are, coming and giving us feedback. So we use a variety of different methods. But the direct customer feedback and the partner feedback are most important for us for getting those insights.
And one of the things I really liked in the keynote was industry partnership with the models for AI.
Yes.
So there's a big list of companies that you've worked with to be able to bring their specialism into your marketplace environment for others to use, which I thought was a nice thing to have.
Yes, at Microsoft, from an industry perspective, partners are critical. So Microsoft provides the horizontal platform, and then our partners have the deep domain expertise. Yeah. And then they take our technology and take it to the last mile and building their applications on top of it, which have the very specific domain use cases.
I'm interested in whether you've seen in your role a change in who the sort of main customer is. And what I mean by that is is it drifting away from being sort of hardcore technologists and sort of moving into lines of business themselves in terms of how they're consuming their enabling technology?
Absolutely. I've been in the technology space for a long time. And over the years, we've seen with SaaS applications, SaaS applications being so easy to deploy that technology in general, you're seeing more adoption and decision-making from what we call business decision makers.
Right.
But absolutely now, in the age of AI, a lot of the executives I'm engaging with are, yes, the IT, but also the different function owners, whether that's the head of marketing, the head of engineering, the head of sales, the head of supply chain. Because for AI needs industry context. Yeah. And when we get into talking about some of the top use cases, it's not just a horizontal deployment. You're really focusing on how can I change my business? And you need to have that industry context to understand how AI can drive that forward.
And it was interesting as well, Satya was talking about ROI And we've gone through the experimental phase, and now we're talking about how we get business results by using AI. And I think it was $3.70 to 1 was the quote I think I saw as a return. So $1 spent on AI gets you $3.70 back from a business perspective.
You have a good memory. Yes, that is. I believe what Satya said.
I mean, that's a hell of a number.
Mm-hmm.
What's your perspective on, or rather, let me rephrase that. What have you had to change then in Microsoft's sort of engagement or even the product set to sort of better appeal to the business buyer rather than the technologist? Do you see what I mean?
Yes. So Microsoft has been investing in industry for many years now, but the amount of focus that we have on industry has increased significantly over the last couple of years, because exactly what we're talking about right now as to how is that buyer evolving, that the business decision makers are more involved directly in the decision.
Right.
So we've evolved all of our teams. So Microsoft has industry organizations. I lead the marketing organization. There's an industry sales team. There's an industry engineering team. So with this focus, again, on the business decision maker or business persona, we've had to evolve both the type of resources that we hire internally. Both myself and the sales and engineering team, we look to choose employees that come from industry so they can talk the customer's language. So we've had to evolve the shape of our teams.
And that's so important, the lexicon you use when you talk to a client. If you say it in their words, because you understand their world, it's much easier to communicate how it's going to work for them. I think sometimes I see technologists come and try and explain a topic which is perfectly relevant, but because they explain it in a way that they find native to them but not for the client, then it's a big issue. That just the words can make a massive difference.
Perfect example of that. If you're talking to public sector or to government and you go in and say, your company.
They don't like that. Oh, no,
it's not their company, it's their organization. Or if you talk about your user, they want to be talking about the citizen.
Yes, exactly.
If you're in education, it's the student.
Yeah. And it's such a simple thing. But if you've not worked in that industry and you don't appreciate it, you'll say the wrong thing. And then they go, well, you don't understand us because you've used the wrong word.
Exactly.
So getting onto AI then and the perspective you might have about its adoption. So as Rob mentioned in the keynote, Satya is talking about, quote unquote, going into the middle innings of AI. And we've got there very, very quickly. Say far faster than something like cloud, for example, where it might have taken sort of 5 or 6 years of the evolution of cloud, I think, to get to the point where people were talking about, full organizational transformation possibility on the back of cloud. AI, within the cloud paradigm has got there within 2 years.
Or even less, yes.
Even less, yeah. Incredibly fast. How are you perceiving the industries that you talk to in terms of their level of understanding, level of adoption, and then are they really moving into the scaling phase at the moment, or are they still struggling a little bit?
So when we look at the top use cases that we're seeing, because again, this is going to be very use case specific.
Yeah.
And there's 4 that we see that are prevalent across all of the industries that we serve. The first one being employee productivity, the second one being business process transformation, the third being personalized experiences, and then the fourth being true innovation, like transforming your business.
Right.
On the first one, when it comes to employee productivity, that's where I see it being most mature. Do you use M365 Copilot?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I couldn't imagine my life without Copilot.
And there's certain key use cases for me, summarization of big data sets. Suddenly I was like, oh, wow, I'll use this all day, every day now, because you get the 150-page document and go, I just need to know the key points, and it'll do it like a snap of the fingers.
Not only that, Rob talks about it all the time.
I also ask it to write cheese jokes for me. It's pretty good at that as well. And haikus is another popular one. I can't write haikus for love nor money, but AI does it like that. Very good.
You know when something has reached a level of adoption is when people are using it in their personal lives. And I have a 12-year-old daughter, and she says to me all the time, Mom, why don't you just use Copilot for that? With the almost 13-year-old, kind of like
sass.
yes, the sass.
Yeah.
So that's an example where, like, I think in employee productivity, most companies have got that. M365 is being used by 60% of the Fortune 500 companies, M365 Copilot. So, that's where I think it's easy to get what are the benefits. You just talked about, summarizing, coming up with, I use it to come up with like first drafts of speeches and things like that.
I am not sure that Rob's use of it for cheese jokes I could fully advocate for. And did you work that into the return on investment number that you talked about earlier? Should you get someone to work that into the algorithm?
Dave,
we can work on that.
Yeah.
Dave, you think about it though, if I have less time writing cheese jokes, I've got more time working, haven't I? So my productivity goes elsewhere. You haven't thought about it like that, have you? I spend less time faffing around with that.
I've not.
And I think there's other examples, like going back to where are the benefits and where is it being adopted. Healthcare is a really great example. We released a product called DAX Copilot just about a year ago. And what that does is when you go to a doctor's visit, do you ever go to a doctor's visit and he's always looking at the computer?
Right. Yeah.
So it changes that whole experience. So as a patient, when you go, DAX Copilot is, in the background with ambient AI listening so that the doctor, instead of typing into his computer, can focus on the patient. And that changes that whole experience for the patient. And
Are they using it for diagnosis as well?
Are they using it? Not particularly for diagnosis. This is, this particular example that I'm talking about is more about being able to capture the essence of that visit.
Right.
Giving the doctor access to your health records so that, again, it's easy, served up right there for them. And then capturing the conversation. So it's not particularly diagnosis, but if the doctor diagnoses you with something, being able to then, let's say you're going in for, your leg hurts. I'm a runner. My hip's always hurting, and it could serve up for him. Here are some exercises that Kathleen should do based upon knowing I had hip surgery years ago and, what my current situation is. So it changes that experience and how the doctor's engaging with the patient, but then also helps the doctor. Have you heard about pajama time?
What's pajama time? I'm interested now.
I'm all in by the sound of it. It sounds good.
So pajama time, most doctors, after they finish their, seeing patients all day, at the end of the evening, have to spend time capturing all of their notes.
That's not what I thought you were going to say.
No. I'm sorry to burst your bubble there.
I'm less interested.
No, but the doctors are very interested because they can spend time with their family in the evenings instead of having to type up all their notes.
So they can actually do real pajama time, like take a lie down.
They could do real pajama time.
And they have to get the notes right, but it is technically toil because they're documenting what they've done and the system's now doing it for them, which gives them,
It's doing that. And then it's also allowing them to see more patients each year.
Yeah.
We're here in Chicago, and Northwestern is one of our customers using DAX Copilot, and their doctors are able to see roughly 11 more patients a month because of how much time it's freeing up for them.
That's
an impact. Like when we talk about AI, again, I love Copilot summarizing my documents for me, but the impact on people, and again, being able to provide better, care or, even in education, being able to help students learn faster. Like these are real impacts of AI.
And for an industry like healthcare that's under pressure for capacity to serve the need, that's a great productivity boost for them. That's a significant change for them because they're really under pressure to get enough face time with the patients to be able to serve properly.
Yeah, and burnout, doctor burnout.
Yeah.
So this is really helping decrease, the burnout with the doctors, with the providers.
Do you see, in terms of scaling AI across the different industries, I very much like the examples, like very specific use case examples. Do you see that the use case route through is the one that's going to sort of be the breakthrough in terms of scaling? And in my head, I sort of see two axes, and I wouldn't mind your thoughts on this. First one is the one you've mentioned, which is things like Copilot. They're very clearly almost instantly applicable, and there's a huge amount of flexibility to it. So you might be having a doctor using it in the way you described, just going to give them family time back, and then you've got Rob who's trying to write cheese jokes with it. But each equally valuable to those individuals, and you can choose the way that you use it. I think that's sort of fascinating, and it's almost scaling itself. The other breakthrough in scaling in my head at the moment, at least, is going to be the world of agents. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that that's going to be the structural way it scales.
Yes.
Does that resonate? Am I sort of missing anything in that model?
No, that resonates. And I like to think about it as, separating out into, we have use cases that are driving cost reduction and productivity. And then we have use cases that are driving revenue growth. And you really need to do both of them. Okay.
Right.
So some examples for like cost reduction would be using an agent for factory operations. So on the factory floor, having an agent that allows you to, when the factory line goes down, to be able to diagnose exactly why that's happening.
Right.
Okay. That is helping me with cost savings because the factory line continues to run. Other agent use cases, like ones in retail, for things like providing a personalized shopping experience, that's one that is going to help with revenue growth because it's increasing your cart size.
Right.
So, for example, think of you're going to be going to a wedding in Chicago in December at a particular, venue. You could go on to one of your favorite websites that is using agent technology. We actually have an agent for personalized shopping. And it'll know, based upon who you are, what you've purchased in the past. So it knows your type of styles. You like a flannel shirt, you like a little bit more of a sweatshirt there. So it knows, kind of your styles. But then also know, okay, what time of year, know how people in Chicago dress, which is going to be different than Seattle, which is going to be different than London.
Right.
And then to serve up for you, here's some outfit ideas.
So like localized version of your look.
Exactly.
Cool.
And because it's a complete look, you may likely spend more money than you would have if you didn't have that whole complete look served up to you.
But you'd like that as well because you don't have to go through the complexity of sourcing where you're at the individual shops trying to imagine it. The AI's done all the hard work for you as well. So you're happier and the shopkeeper's happier.
Yes, and you'll probably look very stylish when you go to the wedding.
Oh yeah, everyone who sees you is happier as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was actually going to ask you about your background a little bit because I understand in your background you worked in fashion.
Yes, I started my career as a fashion designer in New York from the time that I was a child, 7 years old, playing with like fashion plates. Do you know what they are?
I do not.
They're little plates that you would switch out the top, the bottom.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then you put a crown over it.
Yeah.
So I always had this like big dream that I wanted to be a fashion designer. And then I was a fashion designer in New York. And then I started playing with technology. And I'm like, this technology is really interesting and really fun. Right. So I went from fashion design to first technology for fashion to where I am now.
So if you put your fashion designer hat back on and sort of and look at the like tech innovation and the world that we're moving into, which is an AI dominated world, which has got there's some complexity in terms of how it's being adopted by the creative industries and some concern in that. What goes on in your head when you look at it through that lens?
Oh, I go back to my fashion design days when I used to spend hours searching for fabric, searching for buttons, searching for like the latest colors. And the research was fun, but it took just like a ton of time on some of the basics. Right. And if it could have been served up to me, it would have allowed me to actually spend more time than putting things together the right way in my creative skill versus just, having to spend time searching for things. So I actually would have loved to have this technology back then.
It's interesting because actually, did you see Ben Affleck's recent comments on this subject? You saw it, right?
Yeah.
And his perspective was exactly the same, which is like, in his world, making movies isn't going anywhere, but actually there are certain things that we had to do before that we're now going to be able to accelerate or lower the cost of entry. And his point was kind of much the same as some of the points you were making on things like seeing extra patients. It was like, well, the cost of making these things is actually going to go down as a result of removing all of that toil. And therefore, actually, the outcome might be more movies, not like everybody's concerned about AI generated movies. He was like, we're never going to get to that because people like the human creativity that goes into it. We can just do it cheaper and faster.
Yes, and I was a young men's designer, so I'm just thinking more about this. And I did a lot of private label design. So I would have to serve up, let's say, 10 different options of the similar shirt, men's shirt, to my customer. And some of it was just very simple things, like just changing colors out or so. And if you think about technology being able to do that, in fact, that's one of a top uses in the industrial space is using AI, generative design, to come up with more options, more CAD, computer-aided design models. I think it's just completely going to change the way that the creatives and engineers work as well.
If we go back to sort of AI transformation itself and sort of the adoption rate that's going on in different industries, what are the core challenges that are emerging that you and your team are sort of engaging with, both in terms of like helping organizations move to the next level of scaling, but also perhaps how you're bringing that back into product teams and going, guys, we need this and we need this and we need this?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting. What I often tell customers when engaging with them, that AI, it is a transformation, like any other transformation.
Yeah.
And it's not only about AI. A lot of our customers, they started laying the foundation years ago with their digital transformations. So if you think about having your data in the cloud, having a strong data estate, AI needs data. And customers that are further along on that digital transformation, where they're already using the cloud, they have a strong data estate, can now really take advantage of AI at a much faster pace. So first of all, you have to recognize that customers are at different levels of the journey. But some of the ways that we, when we're engaging with customers, we talk about this as a new technology. Any type of new technology, at first there's a little bit of, hesitation. You have to get to learn it. And that also comes into things like skilling. There's new skills that our existing employees need to learn. And there's skills that, that those coming out of college, have the skills for AI. And that's actually an area where Microsoft is investing a lot, is in skilling. So have you been to any of our AI tours?
I went to the floor and saw the big Copilot area and all the focus there. So I've had a good look at that. Yeah.
You've had a look at that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we do what we call these AI tours. So where we go to London, to New York, to Paris, and have on with that AI tour a skilling day. To have for our customers to have their employees come in and learn how to skill on AI.
And it's the thing, like the prompt engineer role didn't exist a couple of years ago.
Exactly.
And now everybody's like, we need prompt engineers.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's a job that just never was there. It's like the YouTube millionaire. Before the platform existed, that wasn't a thing, and now it's a valid individual business model. It's the same thing for prompt engineers. It just popped up.
Exactly. So new skills you're going to need, new types of roles within your company, in addition to upskilling. So I see skilling as a challenge there, and one both for existing and then the new type of roles.
Right. Yeah. And if you were advising a leader, and they might have had their IT do some technical proof of concepts, almost certainly they've read about it and are thinking about it from their sort of business's perspective. What's a good way into this conversation? Like, you might be a bit intimidated by it. You might not quite know how to sort of frame it. How are you advising organizations to lean in?
When I engage with C-level executives and also with their boards, it's actually been surprising, being in marketing, we run all the industry events, to see how many companies are bringing their board members through to learn about AI. So the first thing that I tell them is, this is a transformation and you need to treat it like a transformation. Right. That means making sure that your AI transformation is sponsored by your C-suite.
Oh, for sure.
So it needs to start at the top. The employees need to see that it is being sponsored by the C-level executives. But then also, don't just implement technology for technology's sake. I think Satya said this in his keynote as well. Yeah. Is what are your business outcomes that you're looking to drive? What's important in your business? Because when you tie the technology to what you're looking to achieve, that's where it's going to be more meaningful. And then experiment. Most customers that we talk to, they have 400 to 500, sometimes even 1,000 different possible use cases. Well, let's not go to the unicorn use cases. Yeah. Let's go back to the ones that align with what you're trying to do. Yeah. As I talked about in your business, and fail fast. This technology is moving at a pace that is so quick.
Right.
We talked about the foundation that you need in place, and having that foundation is allowing customers to move quickly. So if the use case is not doing what you expected, then, let's move on.
And the examples you gave were around not solving the whole problem, but solving a part of it, which makes a significant difference, as you say. That's a good point about don't shoot for the unicorn, just solve a bit that you have pain with.
I think the other thing in terms of that process that you just described is that's actually how you get to uncover the new value that you couldn't possibly have thought of before going through that process.
Yes, and actually I have a really great customer example on that one when we're talking about, start someplace. Yeah. So Albert Heijn, and I'm not sure if you know them. They're
no. Marcel is Dutch.
Is Dutch? Yes. Okay, great. Go. So a retailer, supermarket in the Netherlands, and what they started with is one of the challenges that they had was food waste.
Yeah.
So they used AI to do dynamic price reductions. To say, let's say for meat, it's going to go bad after, however many days. When do they have it? When do they do the reduction? At what price to help sell that? So that helped them both to reduce food waste by £500,000 a year. And again, this is a cost savings for them. But then they're using some of that to then invest in new use cases, such as they also have a use case that is more back to that personalized shopping, is based upon what Kathleen has bought in the past, serve up menus for me for the week, and allow me to automatically add those things into my cart.
Right.
So they've implemented that, increases the cart size, and now they're experimenting with a use case on allowing me to take a picture of what I have in my refrigerator, your leftovers, and serve up recipes for you.
See, I really like that one, because how many times you open your fridge door and go, I don't know what to do. And AI just says, why don't you do this? Good idea.
But that example, the cost savings, with the reductions, increasing their cart size, growing revenue, to experimenting in completely new areas.
Yeah, so you're either cost neutral on that, or you're actually saving some money, and you're sort of modernizing what you do.
Exactly. Yeah. And, that's where I think when we talk about AI transformation, that's where the true transformation and innovation comes from. Where you use AI to experiment, to save money, and then reinvest that in new business opportunities for your company.
Well, look, terrific. On that note, I think we can probably draw our conversation to a close. When you get into use cases, it's almost like you could go forever. I find them so fascinating. So thank you very much for spending some time with us today, which is, I'm sure, in a very packed diary. It's great to see you.
Great to see you as well.
Now, we've talked about some important subjects. And I think we've been asking this to all of our guests. We've been running a scientific study to try and understand Chicagoland's deep pan pizza and where people are on this subject. It's controversial, it turns out. More controversial than I expected when we were originally thinking about this. But we've been going through and we've been trying Lumarnatis versus Giordano's. So we're trying to work out, of the two giants of deep pan pizza in Chicago, where people are on it. But have you got a general view? Where do you stand on deep pan pizza? Have you tried them?
I have tried them, but I have to say, living in New York, I'm a New York pizza type of girl.
You know what?
It used to be $1 a slice back when I lived in New York. I'm not sure if you can still get it for $1 a slice, but New York pizza all the way.
You know what? New York's coming out quite high in this scientific study that we're doing. There's a number of New Yorkers have been on and vouching for it very hard.
Have you had New York pizza?
Yeah, I have had.
It's my favourite too.
Oh, good to hear. Yes, can't be beat.
I think though, Dave, if there was a Wikipedia article about you, maybe I'll start one just for a laugh. It would probably start with pizza obsessed Dave Chapman.
Yeah. Well, you've got to commit to the bit, Rob.
Yeah, you've got to.
Got to commit to the bit. If you're going to open up a subject this important, of this magnitude, you've got to go with it, don't you?
We're kind of pizza connoisseurs at my house. My 9-year-old son would eat pizza for every single meal if I let him. So there's a lot of pizza that goes through the Mitford household.
What's his favourite?
Cheese pizza.
Oh, just the basics.
Just a basic cheese pizza.
I think you have to baseline on that, don't you, generally?
You got to get what mom can get at the store that you can keep in the freezer on stock.
Well, I hear this isn't available to us UK residents, but Lou Malnati's, which is one of the two giants of deep pan, ship their frozen pizzas nationwide.
Oh, okay.
You get one of those. Give it a try.
I'll have to check that out.
And they do a double cheese, so your son might like it.
Okay, maybe I can pick some up at the airport, frozen, to take home with me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, thanks again for sharing such an interesting set of stories. It was excellent to look at the whole world of transformation through the industry lens.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I'm delighted to say that we've got Irina Nechaeva, the General Manager of Product Marketing, Identity and Access at Microsoft, with us today. Irina, good to see you. How are you doing?
So good to see you. I'm doing great. I'm very happy to be here with you.
Have you been enjoying your time in Chicago and at Ignite?
Absolutely. It is amazing to be back in person, to be back with the community, to have the connection with customers, with partners, and learning together.
I mean, I do think the big scale events like this one, I know summits and things like that get done in country, but I do think these sort of big melting pot events are really fantastic, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much of the ideas exchange. There's so much that we can learn from each other. I think all of us come back and we have so many new ideas.
Yeah.
That is just a multiplier.
It's that you say this, Dave, you get a sense of the industry and what's going on from the buzz of the show floor, but you do see a lot of what's going on in different regions as well, which is tough when you do it in country because it's not quite got the diversity.
It's almost echo chamber-like, I think, when you do that. I mean, you get some good stuff, but it's all quite self-reinforcing.
Absolutely.
But here, it's much more of a mix-up, and to what Rob said there is true. I love it as a sort of a temperature check on where things are up to.
Absolutely. And as you said, right, because it's such an international audience here, there is just a lot more perspectives that come into play. So you're spot on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Chicago been treating you well?
My first time in Chicago. I think it's been fantastic to at least see some of the city.
Yeah.
It's been a little disappointing to only see it during the darker time of the day. So I'm going to remember it as sort of like kind of Harry Potter-ish type of like dark, magical place.
I totally see that. Like about 2 nights ago when there was low cloud.
Yeah.
Looked absolutely stunning. Very
atmospheric. It did. Very, very atmospheric.
Yeah, very Gotham.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's Rob's first time in Chicago too.
It is my first time, and I've had a very warm weather experience, and now I'm looking behind me and I'm getting more anxious about the snow.
Yeah, no, it is. There is blizzard conditions outside the windows as we speak.
And there's a lot of fire engines. Yeah. You get, in the films, you hear the sirens going off.
Yeah.
In Chicago, I don't know what it is, but I'm hearing a lot of sirens all the time.
About 10 minutes ago, it was like Armageddon out there or something, wasn't it?
It was a little loud, but it looks pretty though. The snow does look pretty.
It looks really beautiful. Yeah, so I've been to Chicago before, but this is probably the most enjoyable trip I've had. I don't know why. I don't quite know why that is.
It's because I'm with you, Dave.
It could be about travel.
That's what it is. And you saw Buddy Guy last night as well at his bar. He came out.
We did.
88 years old, and he's still singing on stage.
Actually, really terrific.
Wow.
To a
he was there.
Blues bar
That's
last
fantastic.
night. It was.
Dave didn't want to go. I dragged him, and look what happened.
I didn't. I thought it would be a bit cheesy, is what I thought, but it wasn't. It was very authentic and
That's
brilliant.
awesome.
But look, let's get on to the main topic of conversation today. So, if you could set the table for us, Irina, just set out what your role is and what perspective you have in Microsoft.
Absolutely. I lead one of the businesses within Microsoft Security. So I look after identity and our secure access service edge product. So Microsoft Entra portfolio. And that, of course, is a part of a larger Microsoft Security business, which is, I'm sure you know, the largest security company in the world with the most diverse portfolio.
Right. And of course, security being built into stuff has always been the way and the preferred way of security professionals. It might not always have been enacted like that, but I think as we go into the age of AI, the importance level of getting that right seems to go through the roof for me.
Absolutely. And we at Microsoft Security are on a mission, as you know, to build a safer world for all. So for us, it's very important to be able to protect Microsoft workloads, to be able to protect heterogeneous customer environments. And now you're spot on. We are working very actively on making sure that as AI becomes omnipresent, we do have all of the right protections so that any organization can adopt AI safely and securely and be confident that AI is only doing the good for the organization.
And I think if you observe the last few years, especially with cloud, everything is code, policy is code, compliance is code. It's getting a lot easier for organizations to implement good security if they elect to do it in the modern way. I think if you still maintain old thinking in security, a lot still struggle. I'd be interested in your viewpoint on how you see the adoption of those modern practices sort of playing out in the wider industry.
You're spot on, because security solutions, it's one of those areas where you cannot wait to modernize. A lot of security tools that were built for the on-premises era, they were great tools for their time. But cloud technologies have very different logic to them. They work in different ways. So when we talk to our customers about evolving their security strategy, we always guide them to start with the place where they secure and govern everything from the cloud, right? Because that's where you get that ability to leverage the cloud scale threat intelligence to actually lean on 78 trillion of signals that solutions that Microsoft generate, right? But that's where kind of modernizing security is something that should come first. And we see in organizations, of course, on all sides of the spectrum. So we hope everyone gets there.
I was going to ask you about that, actually, because you must have a very good sense of where organizations are given your role. And without naming any names, what percentage do you think of the organizations that you're working with have gone through the modernization journey? And the counter-strategic is, are there any that are still hanging onto their perimeters thinking, I'm going to perimeterize my security?
Great question in terms of where most organizations are. What we've seen through research, like where are organizations on adoption of modern security strategies like Zero Trust, the majority are on the journey.
Right.
And that's a great thing, right? Because like any transformation, the important thing is to recognize that the North Star is different from where they used to be, right? So what makes me very optimistic is that most organizations know that they need to be moving towards Zero Trust. They need to be moving toward comprehensive modern security. They're on the journey. Would we want all of them to go faster? Looking at our threat landscape, absolutely yes. And that's where our mission and our collaboration with the community is to help organizations move faster and make it easier to move faster.
Right. And actually, just before we dive into what you guys have been talking about this week, specifically from your area, I'm interested in sort of Microsoft as a leader in this space. And we talked with one of your colleagues earlier in the week about that not only did they think it was imperative that, say, security and regulation was being built in ethically into AI, but actually that Microsoft want to pioneer this stuff and be kind of front and center in the industry conversation about it because they feel like they have a broader role to sort of influence more widely, e.g., better that Microsoft would get there first with a responsible attitude versus, kind of a highly innovative other organization, but maybe not quite as enterprise aware, not quite as aware of their role as a leader and therefore maybe doing some things irresponsibly. Do you have a perspective on that from a security point of view?
Absolutely. We're fully aligned with that perspective when it comes to adoption of any technology, and AI especially, right? And that's where initiatives like Trustworthy AI are so important.
Right.
Because adoption of any technology, and AI as a very powerful technology in particular, should always be done safely, securely, and responsibly. And then when it comes to the security controls, for us, it's also really important that we give customers that choice and flexibility where you have foundational protections that are always enabled by default across our portfolio more and more so. We're making them even non-optional, right? Like, for example, in my space, multi-factor authentication for like administrators is no longer optional. You have to use MFA if you're an administrative user, right? But we also want to make sure that our security controls can extend to any workload in customer environment. And then we also continue to stay true to our belief that security is a team sport, right? And so customers always must have a choice to have whatever combination of security tools that they feel is right for them.
And I think the carrot and stick approach works really well. So for certain things, you must meet this bar, like MFA. Paying attention, Dave. Two-factor authentication, Dave, on important accounts. I'm just raising that with you again.
Are you going to start banging on having post-it notes with my passwords on stuck to my monitors? No good
oh my God, I did not hear that.
But, it's a weird world we live in. But
Marcel's password is Marcel 1941. That's the year he was born.
Wait, Marcel is still using passwords? Marcel, we got to set you up with the passkeys.
Oh,
passkeys.
It has got a capital M.
He's only got one password as well. He uses it everywhere, don't you? That's
no.
But the other side is the education, the awareness, the promoting it, the making it easy to adopt as well. But I do think there is a little bit of, I'm sorry, you can't do this unless you meet this bar. I think that's
while we're talking about passwords, I wonder if you celebrate International Password Day in the way that we do.
We actually already, I think 5 years ago, we started the trend where we called it the International Passwordless Day.
I see.
And yes, so we do celebrate it every year. We now have it more as the industry movement. One thing I did want to mention, though, since we started talking about the passwords, I do hope all of you listeners are moving toward the passwordless authentication like passkeys, because password attacks are the most common identity attack. It is the most common attack, full stop. In just Microsoft Entra, last year, we've been blocking over 7,000 of password attacks per second.
No way.
Per second. That has increased from 4,000 a year ago. So if you're using your password, be sure that there are people who are not good people who know your password.
Did you hear that, Marcel?
I love the greenhouse, us throwing stones in your greenhouse, Dave and Marcel. No. It's beautiful. I think there's two people around this table who maybe have a sensible password policy going away from it and passkey, and maybe two who need to catch up. Not saying who, but...
Are you saying there's some projection happening?
It's all lies. It's all lies. You said you weren't going to embarrass me with that, Rob.
Well, since we got onto the subject, I just thought personal reminder. I mean, some other people might hear that, but...
Yeah, exactly. Right, let's get on to business, shall we? What have you guys been talking about at the conference specifically this time around?
The big news for us at the conference, for Security All Up, I'll start there. Of course, continuation of our Secure Future initiative. I'm sure you've heard of that. Microsoft has prioritized security above all else.
Right, yeah.
Right, we have those 3 principles: secure by default, secure operations, and building secure products. And then we now have like 35,000 engineers working on that initiative, right? That's the largest cybersecurity initiative in the world. Of the product innovation, things that we talked about the one we are really excited about is general availability of Microsoft Security Exposure Management. So that gives organizations a complete view on what potential vulnerabilities may exist in their organizations.
Like system-wide?
Yeah. And that makes it much easier to make sure that they're fixing the right vulnerabilities. We also have different types of business initiatives like Zero Trust. You can see how far along on your journey towards Zero Trust. We're very excited about all of the new experiences in Microsoft Security Copilot. So we have now extended public preview of Security Copilot in my product, Entra. We continue to build more skills in Security Copilot, not just in sort of Defender, the security operations scenarios where we started, but across entire portfolio. So Intune, Purview, really excited about that. And we've also done announcements, big announcements in continuous innovation in terms of protecting AI itself, right? So new capabilities for data loss prevention for Microsoft 365 Copilot, and also data security posture management.
And there was some great, well, not great stories, but there's stories about people who used open AI engines, put data into it, and then the model was retrained against it. And now you can query those models and get corporate information out. I think that, how do I protect DLP particularly?
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that? It's so important because
100%.
User education probably isn't where it needs to be in awareness. And I think it's incumbent on organizations to sort of push the understanding, like we've been discussing.
True.
You can make some basic mistakes and regret it if you haven't implemented it correctly. Again, going back to the point about making it easy to implement this type of stuff.
100%. And I think as, again, security teams, right, and as people who are here to support and enable businesses, we need to do both, right? Like, because education alone and trying to place all of that sort of responsibility on the user will never get you into a place where you want to be. So you also need protections that will just have the guardrails, right? That would make it much harder for people to make those mistakes. Yeah. Right, so
make the right thing easy to do and the wrong thing hard to do.
Right.
Exactly. And then maybe just to kind of finish off on my product in particular in Entra, we're very excited about continuously expanding our capabilities in the Secure Access Service Edge.
All right.
So we've introduced a number of new capabilities for both private access, internet access, and we announced the open SASE ecosystem, which is the first one of this kind in the industry, starting with the network security partnership with Netscope and also a lot of connectivity partnerships with Cisco, HP Aruba, and many other vendors.
And what will that enable? Just go a level deeper on that one.
Absolutely. I think SASE, or Secure Access Service Edge, has been a very interesting category where, of course, many companies are on that consolidation simplification journey. But we also know, just like in a sort of more traditional network security, organizations sometimes have different use cases, different preferences, right? And traditionally, it was a very sort of diverse ecosystem that allowed customers to make a choice of whether they want to go all in with one vendor or they want to create a sort of an ecosystem. And the way we're building our SASE solution is exactly in a way to enable a much more open, interconnected ecosystem, right? Where anyone in the space of that modern network security can also easily interoperate and help customers create the combination of the tools that they believe is right for them.
I see. So there's an element there of sort of setting interoperability standards, that kind of thing. Would that be it?
And making it very easy to even get into that state of ecosystem from inside the product experience, right? We're making all of those companies discoverable right in the Entra Admin Center.
I see. Before we step on, I want to talk about what you think the view of the future of security is going to be in a second, but I just want to step back to one of the announcements that you made, which is the vulnerability detection one. Is that like a pen test? How does it actually show up?
No.
How does it function?
So the exposure management it does more of the evaluation of your environment in terms of what kind of different policies, protections you have in place. Mm-hmm. And it gives you essentially prioritized view of what you may be missing, and therefore what kind of protections, policies, configurations your security team should prioritize. Again, a great example, if you don't have multi-factor authentication enabled, or if you don't have conditional access enabled, and you're essentially giving anyone like only password protected access to some of your most valuable applications, you're probably at a very high risk of being breached, right? So exposure management will show you a great example in my space, right? On the identity side, what does your identity team need to go do first to help your organization be better protected?
Right. I mean, amazing. Does that work across heterogeneous environments?
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. And similarly to what we talked about on SASE, we also announced connectors to other vectors like Rapid7, I believe Tenable, Qualys, and one more vendor. So you can even bring in the data from other solutions as well.
Cool. So over the next few years, then we're going to see more, probably increasingly rapid change in technical environments and how organizations are consuming them and how society is using them. There is clearly an imperative for security to be built into all of this and the guardrails to be in place. But how do you see that evolving over the next couple of years?
It will probably continue on a path where you do need to have a very important foundational built-in security defaults, essentially, right? And I know that definitely all Microsoft solutions, and I do believe that's where the industry is moving as well, right? But we also believe that it will be important to continue to give customers flexibility to augment those defaults with the security solutions that they trust the most. And that creates a lot of opportunity for security industry to continue to collaborate, to continue to build an interconnected ecosystem of security tools.
Right. And when you think about end-to-end,
yes,
and joining up and covering the gaps in between some of these products, how do you see that evolving? Because that to me feels like you might have three products that are sitting across an end-to-end chain, but the gaps in between them might be where the vulnerabilities exist. So are you seeing these interoperability agreements as the place where that's getting shut down, or is there like a different approach to it?
I think there's a little bit of the twofold approach, right? On one hand, of course, as a security vendor that is on a mission to simplify security, to give customers that easy button, we do see it as our mission to create a solution that is very comprehensive for customers and that can protect every surface area, right? With Copilot at its core and going across our 6 product families that integrate over 50 different security categories, right? Between Defender that does threat protection, Defender and Sentinel that do threat protection and cloud security, Purview and Priva that do data security and compliance and privacy, Entra that does identity and network access, and Intune that does management. We already offer a very comprehensive set of technologies to help customers be protected end-to-end, now with Copilot being at the center of the solution. And then, as you said, right, like making sure that as we continue to collaborate as the industry, that interoperability, sort of that ability to configure different products from different vendors is essentially pre-built, right? That customers don't need to do all of the integration work themselves.
Right.
That a lot of those are pre-existing connectors, if you will.
Gotcha. And let's maybe bring our conversation to a bit of a close by talking about the security professional themselves and how their role is going to change over the coming years. Clearly, they're going to have a co-pilot.
Yes.
And that's going to impact. But how do you see that coming together?
OVC Copilot is going to be absolutely transformational for security industry. security is one of those areas that has consistently been experiencing the sort of the shortage of security professionals. At any given moment, there are over 3 to 4 million of the security jobs that are open worldwide. And it is a really stressful work often, right? Because you are dealing with cyber criminals, you're dealing with nation states. So we're seeing Copilot already delivering transformational results for the security professionals. On average, for security, they're seeing about 30% time saving in completion of the task. In my space, right, when we did the sort of the sign-in troubleshooting tasks, they've seen the time saving of 46% and accuracy improvement of 47%.
That is impressive stats. I often think about the evolution of the security professionals they're a bit like the dentist. An entirely necessary and a very important function in society, but nobody wants to go to the dentist.
Oh, no.
And it's like the security, you'd always get that, do we have to go speak to security? And now, when they're moving into a place where they're becoming the key enabler and their persona type almost in the enterprise is changing from those who'll say no to those who will actually enable me to get done what I need to get done.
From dentist to rock star, Irina.
I love it. I think what you're saying is so important because we are seeing that security is becoming one of the core business functions.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, today, every organization needs to think about the risk management.
Right.
And their security posture is such a critical component of risk management. So, absolutely. And security professionals themselves absolutely think about themselves as critical business enablers. So I would love to see that theme become just the way you think about security. That is your biggest business enabler.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today and sharing your insights.
Thank you so very much for having me.
It was our pleasure. Now, we are conducting a scientific study at the moment to understand where the world is on deep pan pizza. We're here in Chicago. It is the land of the deep pan pizza. Where do you stand on deep pan pizza, Irina?
All I can say, I have not tried the deep.
Not even tried it?
No, unfortunately, no.
And is that like an intentional thing?
I think it was more of the situational thing, but I'm guessing my desire to try it wasn't strong enough.
I think that's it, because you're here, you could have done it, you've been here for a few days.
Exactly.
Can I be brutally honest, Dave? The only reason I've now eaten a deep pan pizza is because of you, and you dragged me down there.
You're welcome.
So I'm with you. I didn't really clock, I should try a deep pan pizza, but...
See, that's why you need me here, to bring the cultural element in.
I think you're a perfect combination of two people working together for
the good of the world.
That's not what HR says.
Much stronger outcomes.
Very good.
It's a nice way to put our relationship. I like that. I think
we might use that as a quote, like on our promotional material. So, look, thanks again, Irina. It was great to see you. Have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you so much.
I'm delighted to say that I've got Marco Casalaina, the VP of Products for Azure AI with us. Marco, thanks so much for spending a bit of time with us today. How are you doing?
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm doing just fine on a snowy day out here.
It is blizzard conditions.
Crazy.
Well, it's really nice to meet you, and a pleasure to have you on your show. Very nice to meet you. Pleasure to have you on the show. Good to see you. How has it been in Chicago for you the last couple of days?
Well, it has been a whirlwind, and so I just presented at my last session of 5. So I had a ton of sessions that I've been presenting at because, my job spans all of Azure AI, basically every single thing. I touch all the things because my other title is AI Futurist. And so really, that's actually my title.
We need some prediction. When is the singularity actually going to happen? Hold that to the end, but
singularity. let's
singularity event.
I'm going to add that to I'm going to add that to the list of questions.
No, then we can talk about the heat death of the universe too, if you want.
When entropy occurs,
right? But anyway, I really span across all of Azure AI and what comes next, and of course, Ignite is our opportunity to talk about and to show what comes next. And the other thing is, I don't do slides.
Right.
So
excellent.
I'm all about actually showing it live. And the good thing about what we do with Azure AI, we kind of telegraph our route, as we say in the US. That means to say we have these features that are actually available long before people realize they're there. And so in many cases, as I often say, the future of AI is already here.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It's got here faster than we all expected. So what were the content of the 5 presentations you've been giving briefly?
Well, certainly a lot of it was about the new Azure AI Foundry.
Right.
So the Azure AI Foundry includes a web portal, which we used to call Azure AI Studio, but that's just part of it. This web portal where you can try out the different models and try out different functionalities and things like that. But it also includes the new SDK, the model inferencing SDK, that allows you to change out which model you're using. Because there's a new model every day, every week, every month, there's another one. And rather than making you change all your code every time, now we have this model inferencing API that's part of the Azure AI Foundry that you can use to kind of change out the underlying model without changing your code.
That was certainly the sort of almost marketplace aspect of that was the thing that resonated with us when we saw
the model catalog.
Yeah, I mean it's quite something absolutely critical. I think in terms of fast build and fast experimentation.
Right.
And one of the things that we've been sort of noodling on in our conversation has been a notion of data sources. So in a world of AI where you're trying to build and use tools or even actually query across stuff with just like prompts, wouldn't it be sort of interesting if you could pool data sources from varying different locations and almost to the extent where, say, let's say analyst organizations almost become a data source that can be sort of sucked into AI models?
Well, the way you say it, it sounds like data sauce, which is, what you put on pizza here. But when you're talking about data sources...
We'll come to that.
When I say it with my American accent.
Yeah.
And that gets us directly into the new Azure Agent service. So the AI Agent service, which is also part of the Foundry toolkit. Because when you think about how are you going to connect to these data sources, and it's not even just data sources anymore. I mean, when you think about where AI is going next, first of all, you got to think past the chatbot. It's not just going to be a chatbot anymore, number one. Number two, think past just question answering. Right now, we think of AI as it answers questions for you and stuff like that. No, it's going to start taking actions on your behalf. And so to do that, we're going to want to connect it to, as you say, all these different data sources like Fabric and to various search sources and Bing for the web and those kinds of things, but also to systems of action. You want to connect it to Dynamics and SAP and Salesforce and Office tools and things like that. So it doesn't just answer these questions, that it literally does stuff for you, which I built one of those live on stage over here.
Nice.
Yeah, and it worked too, which was cool.
So do you see the other aspect that we've been talking about actually for the last couple of days, the notion of what AI transformation actually is and how you scale to a point where it's becoming sort of systemically transformational rather than use case transformational. So there seems to me to be sort of 2 planks to an emergent strategy. The first being the personal use case version. So you give somebody Copilot. They might take their professional version of Copilot, the more generalistic version of Copilot, the Office suite version of Copilot, and actually they're using it basically however they want to augment their role. And, we refer to it sometimes like mech suit style on how they're functioning. So that's the one scaling mechanism and one that's actually very visible that's happening already today. But it seems to me, and you already touched on it, that it's actually the agentic aspect of it that's going to be systemically scalable.
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, I think many people still don't realize that this is happening now. But as soon as it starts making bookings on your calendar, I think that's when it crosses the chasm. That's when it's like, oh, wait a minute, hold on. I can actually make this do stuff, right? Once it starts doing that or updating inventory in SAP or really taking meaningful actions that really save you time, take some grunt work out of your day, that's when it happens. And I'm telling you, it's just in the next few months this is going to happen.
And there's a paradigm shift here, which is say I do a sales role or something like that, I have to go into the tool and pull the data out. We're getting to a place where the agent will prompt you out and tell you what to do today. And it's that reverse where the IT is pushing as opposed to you pulling, and I think that'll be a big change for how people operate into that.
Right. Well,
that you described.
And the other piece of it is, like I said earlier, think beyond the chatbot. I mean, when you think about like Microsoft Copilot or really any other AI tool that you might use today, you prompt them, right? So you go in there and you type to it and it types to you. Well, in the future, you'll probably more talk to it actually, because they're becoming more and more real-time speech capable. But there's going to be a lot of these automated agents also. So rather than you specifically invoking it, like imagine if you send me an email and you're like, hey, are you available to meet on Friday at 3 p.m.? And my agent wakes up, reads that email, checks my calendar, looks at Friday at 3 p.m.
It says no.
It's like, it says, not you,
I don't
man.
like this person. Yeah.
Unless you're buying me pizza, in which case, maybe.
Well, that's how I get a diary invite. Say, would you like to come for pizza? That's it. And then you
Right.
program the agent.
And my agent will be like, always say yes to pizza.
This is the future right here, isn't it?
That's my future. That's
right.
And then I'm looking for, maybe a little further on in the future, agent, make me a pizza.
Oh,
How cool would that be? I mean, agent-driven robotics. It's not exactly here yet, but it's coming. And we have in our robotics lab, our guy Tim Chung runs our robotics group at Microsoft, and he has been applying agents to robotics to make them solve novel problems.
I mean, it really does feel like the sort of the future of the humanoid robot that's pretty much like speaking to a human is conceivable, to say the least.
I mean, right. I mean, does it have to be humanoid? Not necessarily.
Could look like R2. I'd probably go with an R2D2.
Or it could I love the movie Bicentennial Man. I don't know if you all have seen that with Robin Williams. A lot of people haven't seen it. Honestly, they kind of nailed it.
Right.
Except for the fact that for some reason, they said it in the year 2005. So I feel like
that's a bit much.
Bit short-sighted.
For a movie that was made in 1997, that was a little bit overly optimistic.
It's ambitious, isn't it? It's an ambitious sort of goal. 10 years.
Right.
Maybe.
8 years even. But, nonetheless, I respect the vision and the optimism of Bicentennial
So,
Man.
in the 60s, they told us we'd have robot butlers by now. And I'm looking around and I'm going, where's my robot butler? But now, after this conversation, you sort of go, well...
Don't even get me started on flying cars.
Soon enough. Yeah, your robot butler's going to fly in on a flying car and bring you a pizza.
Yeah. And
this is a world I want.
Within this scenario, the internet-enabled toaster might actually become usable.
No.
The internet-enabled toaster.
There's this. I have a thing about why. So I understand everything should be connected to a degree, but a toaster is a device you have to approach and use because it creates something for you.
True.
Why would you need your phone to be able to tell it to make you toast when you have to go put the toast in it anyway?
I mean, the only thing I can think of is if you're making like a toaster pizza, right? And it takes like 17 minutes for it to complete.
And it dings you.
Then it could ding you. Okay, maybe. But yeah, you're right. Other than that, I don't really see a use case for it.
Thank you for validating my soapbox moment.
Now, watch out for this bridge. Are you ready for this bridge? So in a world of AI-enabled robots that we've just been talking about, the need for responsible AI, I would say, within that kind of future is extremely important. So I assume we're building the foundations in right now.
Yeah, well, the need for responsible AI is here today, as a matter of fact.
Right.
I mean, for example, this morning I was doing another podcast with my friends from Coca-Cola, and they have built this thing called Create Real Magic where you can talk to Santa. You can talk to Santa, and Santa can make you a snow globe and stuff.
Nice.
It's actually kind of fun, right? And it's like a 3D avatar of Santa. It's kind of fun, right? And they've released this to the whole world in like 26 different languages. But when you do something like that, you release this to the internet, boy, you better be thinking about responsible AI, which they certainly are, right?
Right.
Because the kids are going to be using this thing.
They're interacting,
And at the same time, whenever you put anything on the internet, people are going to try to do something weird. Always.
You can trust in human nature to do that, can't you?
Literally.
Man, they will find the weird in anything. So, they did a really good job of this. I played with it for a while. Santa, I guess. And no matter what I did with Santa was like, let's just talk about Christmas, okay?
Let's keep it on.
You couldn't get him off topic.
Not really. I mean, even I was like, so what is your address in the North Pole? And he was like, yeah, I can't really reveal that, but let's talk about Christmas.
A better use case for responsible AI I can't think about.
Right?
It's the corporate Switzerland, isn't it, Dave? The let's keep on track, please.
Let's keep it on topic.
Yeah,
right?
Like it.
So the other element I want to touch on is the AI tour that you guys have been doing. So, what obviously there must be an element of kind of making people aware of what you guys are doing, what the state of the art is, where you're going next. What else is going on in the AI tour? Is it also a means to educate?
Yeah, the AI tour has been awesome for us. We have, I think, 72 of them in our fiscal year, basically spanning from July 2024 to June 2025. I myself did the keynote in Amsterdam recently. I also did sessions in Berlin, Paris, San Francisco, Bangalore. I don't even remember the other ones.
Did you get a T-shirt with all the dates on the back?
I did not get a T-shirt with the date, right? Or like a rock
sitting
star
right
thing.
there. I was sitting right there.
But I tell you though, I mean, everywhere I go, like when I was in Berlin, all currywurst, man. I'm all about the currywurst.
All right, nice.
Love that. I was in Berlin 3 days. I had 3 different currywursts.
It's a surprise. You look at it and you think, am I going to like that? But when you eat it, it's surprisingly tasty currywurst.
I love currywurst. I love currywurst. And of course, yes, for those Berliners listening to this podcast, yes, I did go to Curry36. But I got to tell y'all, I think Curry Wolf might be the best.
Controversial.
Yeah, that's controversial.
Yeah, well, I think Curry36 is like the original, they say the OG currywurst place.
Right.
And okay, but Curry Wolf has this opium sauce, they call it. It doesn't have real opium in it. It's just hot sauce. But I tell you,
just as addictive.
Stuff. Anyway, but that's what I get out of these AI tours. I go around the world and I eat the food,
You should be like podding it or blogging it.
Yeah,
or
it should be a
like
food
that.
pod here, shouldn't it?
Well, I'm a elite on Yelp. So there's that. I Yelp those things. I do. I Yelp it. I Yelp it from Tokyo and stuff. All this. Yeah, I got Yelps all over the world. But anyway, back to the AI tour. Because again, I could talk about food all day, and we probably will for the rest of this podcast. But I mean, these AI tours are tremendously useful for sharing what's new. I mean, these things are happening super fast and furious, and we at Microsoft, we're moving very, very quickly, as you all may have noticed, right?
Yeah.
And so we do need to share with the world. Here's what these things are. Here's how you use them. Like most recently, the fact that agents can take these actions is really surprising to people, especially when they actually see it do it, right? It's one thing to be like, yes, on a slide, theoretically, an agent could take an action, but then I actually literally build it in front of their eyes and make it do it. And that actually gets applause. People are like, "Oh, hey!" They can't believe it, right?
So I would just build on that point, right, and actually maybe bring in some of your other role, the AI futurist aspect of it, because thinking through where does that go, right? So if you imagine an organization where sort of agents have been widely deployed, they're action-orientated agents. Do you see a world where organizations can practically dynamically reconfigure themselves based on demand?
Well, I mean, I'm starting to see some interesting things going on right now. I mean, I met with Dominic van Proek in Berlin, who's with a company called Leading with AI, and they do AI training. Actually, there are 4 of them. Like, there are 4 people in Leading with AI, and he has worked up all of these agents to do a bunch of tasks that, he otherwise would have no time to do. Like, he posts a whole bunch on LinkedIn, right? And he's got tons of LinkedIn followers, and it's basically an agent that every day prompts him and is like, "Hey, you want to post something on LinkedIn?" And he's like, "Yeah, what do you want to post?" And then the agent kind of works through it and then checks with him after it's, drafted the post and is like, is this about what you're looking for? And he can kind of interact with it that way. So, I mean, what's cool about it is this company, it's kind of a startup, and they're making a fair bit of revenue now. They are teaching and doing this AI training, and they really do put it into practice. And I saw it myself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've seen that there are startups that are specifically agent-first startups. So like before human in this case.
Right.
So that would mean if you created a startup, and let's say your services were digital and virtual. So this doesn't apply so much to where you're delivering physical services. But if your services are digital and probably information-based, it means you could scale to enterprise scale practically overnight, right?
Sure.
There is no kind of limiting factor to how you're then scaling your business. If you've got the ability, if you've got the demand, you can scale instantly.
Sure. But at the same time, I mean, when I think about the startup space, I mean, there are a lot of startups that are literally making new agent frameworks. And agent frameworks are a dime a dozen. There's a ton of them, right? And that's not really where the IP is. That's not where the value is. I mean, the agent framework that's going to win in the end, or the agent frameworks that will win, are the ones that make it easiest to integrate.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're a startup and you're like, hey, we got this cool new agent framework, man, I don't know about that.
It's the interconnected nature of it,
right?
Is where the power really comes from, isn't it?
And that's one of the things. I mean, that's one of the places where we are differentiating with our agent frameworks. We have these pre-built connectors to all of these things: SAP and Dynamics and Salesforce and Workday and ServiceNow, like 1,400 of them already. And I really think that is where our agent framework and the Azure AI agent service will be differentiated in how easy it is to connect to all these things that you want to and need to connect to.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, on that note, let's bring that part of the conversation to a bit of a close today. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your insights on all of that.
Well, thank you.
Good to see you. Now, we have been conducting a scientific study that you may have got a bit of a gist of from the Giordano's box on the table. We have been trying to get to the bottom of.
Yes.
Deep pan pizza or not deep pan pizza, and then for those that have tried it, where do you stand on Malnati's versus Giordano's and maybe somewhere else? Now, I understand, given the sort of foodie adventures you've had on your world tour, you may have a bit of insight on this.
Well, this is true, and I do travel the world quite a bit. I come to Chicago very often, but I grew up in New York.
Right.
So I got to tell you.
There's a bias.
New York pizza is the world's best pizza. And specifically, I'm going to call out Umberto's in New Hyde Park, New York. Now, I was recently in New York, as a matter of fact, and I was there for 6 days. I had 7 different slices of pizza.
I admire that.
That's right.
I admire that.
You better believe it.
Yeah.
With the singular exception of Adrian's Pizza Bar, which is down by Wall Street, which I usually go to because it's really good. The other 6 were all places I had never been to before because I was optimizing for novelty here. But I have done a similar thing here in Chicago.
Right.
So over the past 20 years, I've been coming to Chicago 4 times a year at least. And I have tried every pizza place that you can think of. Giordano's, Gino's East, Lou Malnati's, what else? Uno.
Right.
And Bacino's. I've tried everything you can think of. Portofino?
Pizzeria Portofino.
That one I don't know.
Down on the river.
I may have missed that one actually. That's crazy. Maybe tonight's the night for that.
You got a takeaway.
But I got to tell you, I mean, I actually do think Bacino's is a lesser known one. They don't have that many locations. I think there's one here. There's one in like LaGrange. That one's pretty good. And the difference is with Bacino's, you actually can pick up the slice with your hand. Like the crust is thick enough.
Oh, it holds this.
That it actually will hold up. Yeah, and that I have value that.
This is an important point about pizza, isn't it? The ability to lift it, because with the New Yorks, you see people folding it to keep it straight as they eat it.
And
it's the same sort of thing.
Some will hold form without needing to fold.
Yeah, and some have to fold. This is a good point about the eatability. Is that the metric we start to measure here? Is this a
eatability, right? Or cohesiveness or something. So I took my friend who's from Paris. I took him to Chicago Pizza for the first time. He had Chicago Pizza for the first time. And we sat down, he starts eating. I took him to Lou Malnati's actually, which I do dig Lou Malnati's, the butter crust and all that. Fair enough.
I will come back to that.
It is like pastry.
Yeah. But that's what he says. He goes, this is a quiche.
To be fair, for a French individual, that I can understand why they might draw that parallel. It's cheese and a buttery base.
The buttery crust didn't work for me.
No.
Couldn't get on with it because I was a bit like, it's far too close to a pie. Like a British pie, not a pizza pie.
True. That's fair. Now, have you been to Culver's?
I have not.
Culver's, home of the butter burger. And you'll find Culver's around here. There's one, I think, around here on the south side. And so as if it's that, they have a giant burger there.
Right.
And then they slather it with butter too. And then they have this custard. I mean, Culver's, maybe today's not the day on this wintry day for custard, but they have this custard, right? This frozen custard. It comes out like soft serve.
Yeah,
but it's so thick. You get it in a cone and you can turn it upside down and shake it. It does not come out.
Like custard, but as an ice cream.
Yeah, right. Custard as an ice cream.
Has that just blown your mind a bit?
As a Brit, when you say custard, I have a very particular gloopy yellow vanilla tasting sauce. But this is different.
It's frozen. It's frozen. I mean, but like the custard, it does go straight to your arteries.
Yeah.
So on the deep pan challenge, then. So what comes out as a winner for you on the deep pan challenge?
Well, as I said, I got to go with Bacino's. Like I said, it's a little
structural
known.
Stability.
Structural stability. Also, the toppings are really good. So as a work-a-day kind of a pizza, I do go with Lou Malnati's if I'm downtown, whatever. But, if I'm making a special trip and I'm like, I want a proper deep dish, It's Bacino's.
See, no, so we haven't tried Bacino's. Slightly annoyingly, because I would like to.
It's a bit left field for you, that, Dave. That wasn't on your radar.
No, I know.
I'm starting to question your pizza research.
Excuse me a second.
Well, there's a lot more. I mean, you know what? People keep telling me down here on the south side, even like a half a mile from where we're sitting right now, Rico Benny's.
Right.
And now the thing about Rico Benny's is they got pizza. It's a pizza place, kind of. But what they're really famous for is this breaded steak sandwich. I don't know what they mean by that. Like, what does that mean? Breaded steak
like
sandwich?
deep fried steak with
I honestly don't know.
Like how Elvis used to do
it.
it.
And I may actually trudge out into the snow to go find out because I'm super curious. And again, we're half a mile away from this place.
I mean, it's right around the corner.
Can I be honest, though? This knowledge that you have within you need to download that into a helper agent, and then you can deploy it in cities. Like, which city are you in yet? This one, right?
Yeah,
okay, here's the
place,
advice and guidance. Yeah.
Well, I can't give advice on Rico Benny's yet because I've never been there, but I did do the Portillo's versus Buona Beef challenge, right? So here in Chicago, there's a Chicago beef sandwich. Have you had some of those yet?
Yes, but yeah, I've gone for that.
You go to Portillo's?
No, we went to
Buona?
11 Diner.
I don't know that place.
11 Diner. It was good.
Is it good?
Yeah, it was good. But make their own corned beef, make their own pastrami.
But that's not this I'm talking about. It wouldn't be corned beef or pastrami. This is Chicago beef.
No, go on then.
Straight up. And there's
what's the distinguishing factor of Chicago beef?
Well, the beef itself is not spiced in any way. You think about corned beef, it's kind of salted. Pastrami is spiced and salted. Chicago beef is like roast. It's like roast beef, but hot.
Nice.
And then the way that you're supposed to get it is extra dipped, or as they call it at Buona Beef, baptized, right? So they literally dunk it in the thing, the whole sandwich. They take the whole thing, and it comes out super messy and wet.
Is it like a knife and fork affair, or is it?
No, you eat it with your hands, but with a lot of napkins.
Right.
Right. So, I got here, Saturday night I got here, right? It was like 12 o'clock in the morning. I got in, I live in California. But Portillo's is open till 1 a.m. So I'm like, all right, it's on. I went to Portillo's. I got the beef and I got a Chicago hot dog at Portillo's, which they are also really good at, right? Now, right next to my hotel is Buona Beef. Now, my wife is from Chicago and she speaks ill of Buona Beef, but I was like, I got to make a data-driven comparison here. Now, you can't really eat these things back to back because they are quite large, but
you have to be some constitution.
What I did do was,
but you've got to have some scientific formality in the test.
Exactly, and I figured 12 hours of separation is enough that I can remember, the Portillo. So, 12:30 in the morning, I ate my Portillos. Right now, I woke up in the morning, went for a run, right, to kind of cleanse myself, right?
Yeah, get ready, yeah.
And then Buona Beef, and I got the exact same thing. So there, I got a baptized beef and a Chicago dog, and I have to admit, my wife was totally right. Portillo's is absolutely better. Sorry, Buona Beef partisans, but I'm telling you, Portillo's is off the hook.
God.
This is basically a consumer advice podcast now.
Yeah, honestly.
We are there, aren't we? We are there. The other thing the Americans do well is your hot dogs. You have a better hot dog to bread ratio. There's less bread,
infinitely
right?
better.
Whereas in Europe, they appear to just have a really big amount of bread and a tiny sausage, and I'm like, I much prefer it here.
Well, I don't know. I usually get. I spend a lot of time in Germany too.
Oh, well,
so,
there's just the sausage.
I've been to Germany 4 times this year, right? And not just Berlin, Munich too, right? And so it's just the sausage. There is no bread.
There is no bread. There's the sausage.
Maybe you get a Kartoffelknoodle, one of those like dumplings that like stick to your stomach. I love that stuff.
Or they just give you a slice of bread and go, you may want this. And here's the sausage.
Just eat the sausage. Here's some sauerkraut though.
Well, I think Marcel and I, who actually committed to the pizza testing, unlike some people I could mention.
I legitimately had work to do.
Yeah, and we came out with. Where did you come out, Marcel?
He likes Giordano's.
Yeah, it was Giordano's.
And and the funny thing is, like you guys are pronouncing it like the way Chicagoans say it, which is they actually pronounce it with a G, like Giordano's,
yeah,
right?
Giordano's.
Because the proper pronunciation of that in Italian, and I have an Italian background, is Giordano's. It's like a J sound, right? But here in Chicago, everyone's like Giordano's. I'm like, that's weird.
And that's literally how we've been mangling it as well.
And honestly, Giordano's is not bad. It's not bad. I like it, but I would go for Bacino's Lumalnati's any day.
And we had it for lunch, but it was so much that we didn't have any dinner.
Didn't have any dinner.
Oh man,
it was. I came out on Giordano's as well.
Yeah.
on two levels for me. One, I thought the marinara sauce was really, really good.
It's true.
Really, really good. And then it had more like a normal pizza base. Mm-hmm. So it had no structural stability.
Right.
I mean, it was an absolute collapse the second you take one of the slices out. But extraordinary cheese pull, I will say that. And with Malnati's, and it might have just I might have misordered because
You got a super spicy one.
Like a fool, I didn't go for a baseline test.
Yeah,
so I should have gone for the cheese. So it could be on me.
Classic.
Now, a baseline, I got to tell you that a baseline test for Chicago pizza is not necessarily the cheese pizza. I mean, I think the baseline test for Chicago pizza is the sausage, right? So
that's the classic they have there, isn't it? That's because I went.
It's called classic for a reason.
I've turned up and I've gone, well, I've never had one before, so I'll just go for the classic because they've called it the classic.
Right. And it should
God
have.
forbid
Right.
we just pay attention to what the menu says, David.
Why would you do that? It's like
rather
reading
than mangle your order.
Yeah.
And a Chicago pizza, a classic, right, with the sausage, should feature, centered in the middle of it, a nearly solid disc of sausage, right? A disc of sausage that's so dense that it almost has its own gravity, right? If it had just a little bit more sausage and it would actually pull itself into a black hole.
After eating it, I definitely had a little bit more gravity, that's for sure.
It definitely felt like that. Well, look, what a pleasure to speak to you. The last of our conversations this week, and
I think we've answered the pizza bit though, Dave. We got
honestly,
there, didn't we?
We got to a conclusion on the pizza challenge that was far better than I could have ever imagined. So, Marco, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to talk about pizza anytime.
All right, Robert, I think we're nearly done.
We are a bit sad to be leaving. I like Chicago. I really do like it. As all the American cities I've been to, this one is probably going to be my favourite.
I do like it a lot. I think for me, it's probably between this and New York.
Apart from the weather, which is causing me travel anxiety.
It's closed in, isn't it?
It is.
Closed in.
There's less snow.
I can see a building next door now, so and there's still cars on the road. So
it is lightening up, and actually the snow on the roads looks a little bit clear. So should we get out of here?
Yeah, let's get out of town. But I, you know what? I've really enjoyed it. I think it's a fantastic city. Well done, Chicago, for hosting a great event. I've really been quite pleased to be here. So if you would like to discuss any of the topics we've had on the show over the last few days, then please do get in touch with us. You can email us at cloudrealities@capgemini.com. We are all on X and LinkedIn, and we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to connect and DM if you have questions you'd like us to tackle. Of course, please rate and subscribe to the podcast because it really helps us improve our show. So a huge thanks to all our amazing guests from Microsoft who've been on the show over the last 3 days, and to Dennis, of course, from Microsoft, who's helped us arrange it so perfectly well and get such amazing speakers for us. I'd also like to say thank you to our sound and editing wizards, Ben and Louis. A great performance in turning around the pod so fast. And of course to our producer who kind of turned up, was there occasionally, remembered to push the record button, and somewhat bumbled through the whole event.
I would say, I don't usually come into the thank yous, but it's not my space. But I would say, if you're the guy that's responsible for pressing the record button and podcast gold is literally going on around you, what would you do, Rob?
I'd push the record button, Dave.
Yeah, so would I.
Yeah, and let's not talk about the comedy gold that was lost. That validated me. But anyway, and thank you to all our listeners. We really appreciate your support. See you in another reality next week.